Welcome back, everybody, to a brand new episode of the Heart and Hustle podcast. This one's a special one because Father's Day is approaching, and I've got my one and only dad with me. Today, we're really going to be focusing about kind of the heart and hustle behind being a dad.
Yeah.
You know, I've always been very lucky because you have always been an entrepreneur. And I talk about this in other episodes, but the fact that you've always kind of led by example has always been something that I've really appreciated. And so today, we're going to kind of dive into what it really took to be an entrepreneur father and how you kind of balance the heart of having a family and the hustle of trying to make something for yourself. But
Interesting.
appreciate you being here today.
Well, thank you, Keenan. It's good to be here.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's funny. We call it heart and hustle. I think it's more like the heart, the hustle.
That's fair.
That's a good one, right?
Yeah, that's actually really good. I like that. So here's a question for you. So as a father, when you first had a child, right, you had to make some tough decisions when it came to providing for the household, right, and kind of making some decisions in like the family nucleus of like who is going to be the person who goes out and tries to provide for everybody. Now, let's give everybody a little bit of an understanding of how old you were when you had me. So why don't you take us to kind of what that...
Actually, I was younger than you are today.
Yeah.
Right? So I was 28 when you were born.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I was 28 when you were born, got married at 27, right? So think about that. And both your mom and I both had good jobs, and we were working together, trying to determine how to eke out a living. We weren't making a lot of money independently, but collectively we could get by, right? Yeah. We both had steady, fixed jobs for organizations that were, both of them were large organizations, so we had some sense of security that we knew we had a place to go Monday through Friday. Typically, you'd work the 8 to 5 and go home and have your weekends free. And so we kind of got into that whole, if you will, whole regiment of going to work every day, right? Which is really what it was all about back then, right? Mm-hmm. And then something happened, of course, and after we got married, about a year later, you were born. Yeah. And so it was something that we kind of quasi planned. Mm-hmm. We knew we wanted to start a family. Mom was ready to start looking at being a mother. And so we were blessed, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, there's a bun in the oven, right? Yeah. And then you were born in 1990.
So that was like a pretty big jump, right? So
huge
you and
jump.
Mom have been together since high school. You
Correct.
now have a child, right?
Correct.
On the way. So
on
was
the
there
way.
any type of like realization that you kind of had to level up your skill set as like not only a professional, but also a husband? Was there like a personal development boost that kind of kicked in at that point in time?
It was interesting because, candidly, when you're at that age in your life, there's so many things going on around you. Mm. A good example would be, all your friends are making lifestyle and life-changing decisions, whether it's getting married. There's a lot of pressure on a lot of folks in their mid to late 20s to get married and to start having families and to partner up with the people that you love and want to spend time with. And so a lot of that's going on, right? So almost every weekend there was another event where you're going to somebody's house, you're either barbecuing or you're celebrating, in addition to what you may be doing with birthdays and traditional holidays. Then all of a sudden you look around and you're so busy, and all of a sudden there's this change coming because, 1 and 1 at that point is still 2. Yeah. Now it's 1 and 1 equals 3, right?
I always thought that, the process of bringing a child into the world from like a man's perspective is like, okay, I really have to like tighten my shit up, right? Because like I have to provide for a family now. Like I'm not just out here by myself, and I feel like that's a wake up call that a lot of people experience. Did you kind of have that as well?
I was still pretty active, right? I rode bike every week.
Yeah. I
was into biking quite a bit. I played a lot of basketball.
Even from a mindset perspective.
Yeah. So where I'm going with that is I really didn't pay attention, right? Pregnancy was beautiful. It was great. It really hits you like a frying pan smack in the forehead. When that baby is born, the reality is right in front of you. Yeah. Specifically, when you watch your child come into earth, become a fully functioning baby coming out of the womb. Yeah. That's scary as hell, but guess what? It's so exciting that you recognize, It's time. It's time to man up, right? It's time to get beyond just you and mom or you and your significant other. It's now redirect, right? So let's imagine this, if you will. If I'm looking at you right now, we're having a conversation. Now I'm looking at you, then all of a sudden I'm like looking at that too, right? So all your energy goes from just being singularly focused and from a singular perspective to now your energy becomes, I'm focused on mom and her well-being. Now I'm focused on this little rascal as well because that's going to be the future.
Yeah, this is a weird question, but did you kind of have that? I've read and heard and seen a lot about the experience of like when you have a child, you're like, wow, I can see myself in that thing. Was that like that for you?
Yeah, I think so. I think where I was from a, if you will, a maturity perspective, I don't know that I was really ready to be the dad. I mean, I was still growing up myself, right?
Yeah.
And having a lot of fun and having freedom and doing a lot of fun stuff. Mom and I were traveling a lot together, and every weekend we had something planned. And then a little monster named Keenan was coming, and when he was born, we started, putting some of those things on the back burner and redirecting our energy towards being the effective parents that we were going to be.
Yeah.
And so it's a riveting experience when you go through having your children, because it redirects, it makes you reframe who you are and redefine what's important.
Yeah. So that transition is a big one. And that kind of leads me into the next question. So what type of things did you realize needed to start changing? And then how did you start deploying the tactics to like be a little bit different? Was it being more organized? Was it being more attentive to mom? Was it saying no to certain situations and social outings? What was that like?
Yeah, it was interesting. I think more than anything else, it was not just physically being there, but being present. Physically you could be there, but being present mentally was a kind of a new learned thing to do.
Yeah.
Because, your loved one, the person, mom in particular, has a baby. It's not her baby. It's our baby. Right? And so the coaching for me, which I'm fortunate because your mom was so good at, keeping me grounded by saying, you don't just need to physically be there, but you need to be present. And being present was so important because it brought us closer together.
Yeah.
So for instance, if you walk in the house at the end of the day and you take your shoes off and you put your backpack down and you go to the bathroom, you change your clothes and you grab a beer and then you sit down and grab that remote control, that went away.
Yeah.
Because now it's like you come home and the first thing you want to do is hold the baby and give mom a break.
Right.
Because we know, or if you're fortunate enough and your significant other stays home with the baby, that's a big task. It's a big lift to take that responsibility on 24/7. So before you were born, it was just, there wasn't a need to think about anything other than what are we going to do, right?
Did you and mom ever have the conversation about what are the expectations now that we have a baby? I was out with my buddy Sue the other day, and him and his wife Nicole just had a baby, and he was talking about one of the things that he wished he could have done better was had a real conversation about, or at least he emphasized how important it was to have a conversation about roles and responsibilities and being able to raise a kid, right? Because now mom has extra responsibility of raising a child. You're off working and everything, and like the maternal instinct in itself is a whole different animal.
Sure.
Right? You're still working out there. So how did you guys kind of balance those early stages of having a baby and like chopping up these responsibilities?
So a valuable lesson for me was that when you were born as the first child, mom spent some time at home and I continued to leave every morning and go to work. And I didn't recognize how difficult that was for her being home with a newborn all day. And then when she ran out of her PTO, I took a week off.
Yeah, let's dive into that a little bit. So when you think about mom being home with a baby, what were like in your younger mind going on? Was mom just like hanging out? It was relaxing? Do you know what I mean? If you didn't fully understand all of the work that went into it. Because it's difficult for me to even understand, what does that really mean?
Well, what it means is that the little body snatchers not only snatching their body, but it's also snatching your time, right? So, for instance, you you assimilate to the baby's behavior. So, for instance, baby's up at 2 a.m., you're up at 2 a.m. Baby's down at 7 in the morning and sleep until 9. You need to try to get down at 7 in the morning and sleep till 9, right? So everything the baby did, you kind of had to emulate, because if you didn't, you would be a wreck, right? And so when we first started having these conversations about mom being home on PTO after you were born for I think 4, 6, 8 weeks, and then I took over for the week, I'll never forget that she went back to work and I took over her role and responsibility. I think it was for a week or 10 days or whatever. And I'll never forget how it was so impacting that she was gone and it's my turn.
Yeah. No cell phones, no texting, none of this back in the day.
No, there was no cell phones, no texting, no email,
no YouTube videos.
No YouTube videos. It was you, the remote control, and a phone box on a wall.
Yeah.
Not a lot of calling going back and forth because nobody did that, right? And just to check in maybe. But I remember when she went back to work and I had you for the first time and she gave me the list of things to walk me through the routine. Fortunate for me, I enjoyed spending that time with you before she went back to work. So you'd cry in the middle of the night, I'd get up.
Yeah.
And I'd go hold you and get you back to sleep and let her rest. Because I was already intimately involved in what that looked like for taking care of you as a child, as a baby. So when she went back to work, all of a sudden it's me and the baby. She's leaving at 7:30, 7:15 in the morning, gone, won't be home till after 5. Then I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? Right?
Yeah, Darry's on on an island by himself.
Right?
Yeah.
So the routine kind of, you want to keep the routine as intact as much as possible because we're all habit forming by nature. So when you'd eat in the morning and most babies are one bottle babies or so, maybe 1.5.
Yeah.
For some reason, little Keenan, when he was a baby, he was a 3-bottle baby.
Can't get to 6.
Couldn't get enough.
35.
Couldn't get enough. And so it was a constant of feeding, changing, bathing, and then hoping somewhere in the back of your mind that you've got to go to sleep at some point.
Yeah.
And then when you would rest, then it would kick in. Now it's time to take care of the house. And we had a dog then and all that. So taking care of the dog, making sure the house was cleaned up, picked up, beds were made, all the things you normally would do. And yes, I'll admit, I did do a little bit of laundry because you have to, right? And so assimilating to what your schedule was really important. And then I found out that I recognized that by the time Mom got home, first couple of days, I was equally as tired, if not more so, by taking care of you than I would have been by going to work.
So what I hear is brand new territory for you. Right. Having to go through the ups and downs of being alone and taking on the responsibility of raising little Keenan, who drank nothing but milk in bottles, it sounds like, right? So the resiliency that it kind of took to make it through that was kind of eye-opening. Is that fair to say?
It was, because so what happens kind of naturally is that your needs and wants become secondary.
Yeah.
So the little monster called the baby now becomes, your primary focus in everything that you do, right? Mm-hmm. Baby's hungry, you feed the baby.
Yeah.
Baby needs a diaper changed, you change the diaper. Time for a bath, you provide the bath, right?
But you guys at this time are also growing a family, so I'm sure that there's a little bit of pressure when it comes to making ends meet. And Mom's on PTO now; she's going back to work. You're trading off and stuff like that. So how did you balance the work-life balance elements of there's pressure for us to make it on a dual-income household with a child, but what techniques did you kind of deploy to be all right, I need to be a little bit more present? I love that one. That was a great tactic. But what other kind of things were you doing?
I think redirecting the time allocation for outside activities. Mm-hmm. I was like I said, avid bike rider and avid hoop. I played a lot of hoop basketball, and literally me and my friends, we would go anywhere from 3 to 5 nights a week, playing or doing something around basketball or biking. Right, we were always doing something busy, or playing tennis even, and so we were always busy doing things. And then on the weekend, it was like, okay, where do we go next? Right, whether it was going to go visit, friends and family in another part of the state, or going to the beach, or going to the mountains, or whatever. We did something every time. and even in the winter, we did on the weekends. It was skiing every weekend, right? So we did a lot of fun stuff. So post baby being born, it was like, okay, well, we can do that, but we can't do it every weekend, right? And so all of those things started to redirect. And then this is something else that's very interesting. All of those friends that didn't have babies and kids kind of were doing their thing. And then all of us who did were kind of doing our thing. And next thing you know, you're hanging out more with those people who have something in common in the form of a baby or a child versus those who don't, because you're living the same cycle of life. Yeah. So that was a change, right? Your friends change. And so
I think that's a natural part of kind of the growing up process. And like, I've even seen that to the day. I mean, I'm 32 years old now, right? I see friends who have children, and all of those guys and families do things with the children, right? And they're still the lone of the left standing ones out here who aren't doing that stuff consistently.
So what was interesting also too is that, this whole idea of lifestyle balance, right? What did it mean by having children? Of course, you were born first, and then second, of course, your sister. And when that all came about, it was added even more dynamics, right? Because we had a toddler and then we had a newborn, right? And so now it became all hands on deck. It was even more so when we started figuring out how to manage one child in a very effective and kind of if you will, simplistic way by time sharing and splitting our time appropriately for mom to have some time to herself, me to have a little bit of time to myself, and then spending all the rest of our time with you as a baby. All of a sudden now there's another baby that comes to our family. And when Alexa was born, it now became, okay, we had this bond of everything that we did was not just around Keenan anymore, it was also around Alexa. And so then we became like this pod, if you will, right? And the pod was mom and dad and the kids. We would do everything with the kids, right? And so we were very cautious because we didn't want to spend time away from the kids. We weren't looking to get away from the kids. We're looking to do things with the kids, you and Alexa. So we weren't pawning the kids off. We were making sure that we were actively involved in everything the kids needed, even as infant and toddler.
Well, one thing that I also think about today is I hear a lot of people who have families, right, who start families, often talk about how important it is to have the supporting grandparents around. Speak about your experience with that, because if I'm not correct or if I'm not wrong, you guys didn't have that sense of support.
Well, we did, but we didn't. We didn't because so Lori's brother, Kevin, had kids first. And it seems like the first batch of kids or grandkids are always the chosen ones first, because they're the anomaly. They're the bright star or the bright light on the horizon. And it's easy to look to those kids because guess what? They're the first, right? And so from a grandparenting perspective on Lori's side, mom's side, the energy was more geared towards Kevin's kids versus our kids. In addition to that, Lori's sister, Anna, was also having kids after you were born. Then, within 18 months or so, 15 months, then Monique was born, which is Lori's sister's child, my niece, Monique. And then Alexa was born, and then all of a sudden, then another one's born. Anna has a second child. So grandparents from mom's side were constantly busy on that side of the equation.
And proximity was huge with that
to
as
some
well.
degree it was, right?
Yeah.
And we didn't live across the street or in the same city. So it was a 2.5, 3 hour drive to visit. And so there wasn't a lot of time for grandparents to parachute in, parachute out, parachute in, parachute out. And honestly, that was okay with us because we enjoyed doing the things that we did independent of what the grandparents were doing. We wanted you guys to be close to the grandparents because that's what you should be doing. But the grandparents were busy, and if you couldn't make it or there wasn't the ability for us to get together, we were fine with that.
And I feel like that's actually been a big part of like our family identity as well, is we've always been okay being us. Yeah. Right? Yeah. We've never needed the extra people to kind of feel, I guess, secure in who we were as a family nucleus.
So, we talk a lot about, balance, right? And whether it's lifestyle balance or interpersonal balance between your husband and your wife, or the balance between what the kids' needs are versus what your personal needs might be. Then layer that with all these other other activities in your life that take up your time, right? So one example would be where we lived. I had relatives, brothers, sisters, cousins, family on my side in addition to mom's side. So what we found is we never found time for ourselves because on the weekends we're packing it up, we're going to a birthday party or we're going to an event or it got to the point where you couldn't really have the quad time. You couldn't have the Lori, the Keenan, the Alexa, and the Darryl time because we were always pushing out in a different direction to satisfy somebody else's need or request to be with us. And the dynamic is somewhat of a divisive dynamic because you really don't get a chance to hone in on who you are as a little family as much as your time is being taken away. So there's a birthday, there's a baby shower, there's an event. And so all of a sudden we look around and there was no time for us as a fam, right?
Raising a young family, was this something that created a little bit of hardship with you guys? Was this like a time or a challenging kind of like moment that you guys had to recognize?
Honestly, I think Mom and I were so into it that we came closer versus pushing apart. I don't think we ever had conversations about not doing things with you, the kids, and roles and responsibilities. It was implied and known that this is what we were going to do. And so we had to make a couple decisions that were really tough. So your mom, in and of herself, was a successful individual in that she had a wonderful job, a great career, actually made more money than me, and she was very good at what she did. And then I was kind of that, green and growing, trying to figure out what I was going to do, working for a large organization, and we had to make a decision. So here's what the decision was. We got to that point where we had to parent, but we also had to provide. And so we decided as a family, as a couple, after Alexa was born, and she was probably about 6 months old, maybe a year. And we said, sending the kids to daycare every day so Lori and I could, feed our own ego and professional career and growth personally, we had to make a sacrifice and ask ourselves what made sense for the kids, what made sense for our family. So even though Mom was making a good salary and enjoying the career that she had, it was really wearing on us that we would actually leave the house at 6:30, 6:45 in the morning, drive a few miles and drop the kids off, go our separate ways, and then figure out how to pick who's going to pick the kids up on the way home, get home, and then start the whole night routine, realizing that you really had about 4 hours with the kids of quality time, that between getting home, bathing, doing the things you have to do, get the kids to bed, and then you have to put the kids down. All of a sudden you look up and it's 8:30, 9 o'clock. Then it's time for Darryl and Lori time, only to have an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then go back and do it again.
Yeah. So who brings up this type of conversation? Is this like a shared experience?
In our case, it was shared because there was also the boogeyman, right? Here's the boogeyman. The boogeyman was, how much are you paying out of pocket to have somebody else watch your kids each day?
Which also, like at a young age, you know what I mean? Like the babysitter. I remember going to Surrender's house. That was my first.
She lived less than 2 blocks away.
Yeah, but I also remember being raised with her values because she was also raising her
That's
children.
correct. Who were similar age.
Yeah, and so that's very interesting. I don't think a lot of people think about that. It's like when you take your children and put them into daycare, they're being raised by somebody else's values a majority of the time.
Well, not only that, though, it's the mannerisms, it's all of the behavioral issues, it's the process and how people go through the day. It becomes regimented, and all of that time you'll never get back as a parent. So when we got to a point where we figured out that economically, right, said and done, was it worth an additional net of $500 to $800 a month to have our kids go somewhere else after paying for all of that? Or could we just say, you know what? We'll drive a van and we won't drive a sports car. And driving a van gave us more flexibility versus driving the Infiniti Q45 because it was 4-door and it was a sports car versus a Mercury Villager. And the Mercury Villager came into play because it was more economical. It wasn't as expensive, But guess what? The Mercury Villager allowed mom to stay home. And so that's what we decided. We decided that collectively, mom and I, that it was more important to us and the family to have mom there to be able to spend that time with you guys in your formative years so you knew that things were going to be solid, steady, and you didn't have to worry about anything. And so as a parent, then it became more dynamic in that I had to go hunt every day. And when you put that pressure to go hunt every day, there's no room for error. You can't become unemployed. You can't make a decision at work that's going to be detrimental to the family. And you need to figure out how to cope, get along, assimilate, and be consistent so that those at home, mom, the kids, are taken care of and insulated against some of those things that you would normally see in the real world as a parent, right?
So let's talk about the mindset that comes along with that. So you guys go from a double income household, right? Now Darryl's the one sole provider. How much are you making at this time?
Let's see here.
So this is 1994.
In 94, I think I was making, it depends. So
because if Alexa was 6 months old, she was born in July. So that would
93. She was in July of 93.
Yep.
I want to say that at the same time that we were going through this, I made a career change. I was making about $76,000 or $74,000 working at a bank.
Yes.
Just, VP, assistant VP, getting ready to go up the corporate ladder. Mom was at home. We didn't have a lot of assets. We didn't have a lot of debt because we were very mindful not to borrow our way into life.
Yeah.
But we were making it. Didn't have a lot of savings either, but we were okay. And then I made a decision. We made a decision together to start a business.
Yes.
And coincidentally, by starting that business, our income went from, 70 some odd thousand, family of four, to over 100 some odd thousand, family of four.
Oh, that was not what I was expecting. I thought you were going to talk about the downturn of the first couple of years.
Interesting enough, Keenan, when we started the business, the Adventures in Advertising franchise that we had in the Seattle area, I think I sold $740 some odd $1,000 worth of promotional products year one.
Oh, wow. So you're
and we had margins north of 40%.
So when you start making better money, right, one of the things that I hear a lot of people talk about is like once you get your first taste of that level of success, it becomes kind of addictive and you want to start doing it more and more and more. So you have a $700,000 year. You guys are making really good money, right? Does the lifestyle inflate at all? Are you working more now that you kind of have the pressure like you talked about?
We were able to run our business inside of our home. We had an assistant that was there full time working. I would go every day out and go sell something because we didn't eat unless I sold something. And we were fortunate that we had some large clients that liked me and did business with me. And they gave mom the financial security of knowing that, hey, we're doing pretty good. So she could do the things she wanted to do with you, right? And that being said, we weren't wealthy at all, but we were doing okay. And that was kind of the impetus of us saying, okay, well, we can do better because other business opportunities would come along and so forth and so on. And so we haven't looked back since then, right? But I went from making a salary to creating a lifestyle. And that was the transition for the family.
And this is something that you've always told me. You're like, you know what? When you are doing things correctly, and I'm going to paraphrase this, like your business starts to take on a life of its own. And the one thing that you can never quantify is the lifestyle that your business can create for you. And now today, topic of discussion is like lifestyle entrepreneur, right? Designing a business that helps you live the lifestyle that you want to. So you were doing this in those early days.
Absolutely, 100%. It was something that came about because of the hard work, and having some success allowed us to do that, right?
So how did you not get caught up in the hustle of it all? Because like I today find myself often wanting to work more, work harder, because it's something that I enjoy doing, but I obviously don't have a family. So how are you balancing the chase of success in this new lifestyle and the taste of the fortune that you could build for yourself with a business and a vehicle that creates a lifestyle for you? How are you balancing
this is where you have to be
mindset?
sensitive to where you were as an individual, right? So again, all of those things around, body snatcher number 1, body snatcher number 2, time snatcher 1, time snatcher 2, redirecting our lives to focus on the children. That refocus was both good and bad. Good in that the nurturing, being there when you needed, having mom there, you have to admit, at breakfast every day, you went to school with clean clothes on, you were picked up, well, I won't say every day on time, but but the fact that she was there at your beck and call, if something happens at the school, she's there in 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and she was always there for you, and she maintained an incredible household, right? I mean, everything was always in order, and there was never an issue, right? That was good for her because it allowed her to really focus on you as the children. It wasn't so good for her and I in that we kind of did this together to make sure that was set, and then we kind of did this and kind of went our own little ways because I was over here hunting and she was taken care of. At the same time, we're going down this path together. My role is different than her role. And so that kind of pushed us, her and I changed the role definition of our marriage, of our partnership, to where it became about you guys at the end of the day and not about us at the end of the day.
Yeah. So looking back now, all right, hindsight is 2020. What do you think you could have done better in those early days? Was it communication? Do you think you could have done things differently?
Again, hindsight is 2020. I think what the lesson learned would have been being a more effective communicator with my partner and sharing some of the intricate details of what I was experiencing, building a business with her so she could also live that with me and not having her feeling as though to some degree that she was on the outside looking in.
Well, I mean, I'm sure in those early days, right, the stress of trying to build a business, if you're successful out the jump or not, is still very taxing.
Oh, no doubt.
Right?
Yeah. Well, what it does, though, so there's the hunter, right? The hunter's going to hunt. Like you mentioned earlier, it's hard for you to turn it off. When you're hunting, you don't turn it off because you're looking for the next opportunity. And that takes you in different directions, right? For instance, all of a sudden, instead of coming home at 4:30, 5 o'clock for my normal job, I'm getting home at 7 or 8 o'clock because I had to go meet somebody for a 5 o'clock meeting or go meet somebody for, an after work meeting or entertain someone. All those things started taking more and more time away from being with the kids per se. Again, being there or being present. I could be there even when I was there. Doesn't necessarily mean I was present because I was thinking about a lot of the other things that I was doing in order to provide for the family. I think the lesson learned would have been to be a better communicator with my partner, your mom, so she could fully understand some of the things that I was experiencing out hunting and what it meant for me and how it took me away from her as a partner, but knowing that I was doing it in order to support her, you, and Alexa and the family. If we could communicate and learn that early, I think we probably would have just had a little more, if you will, more robust relationship versus that separation of me going my way to some degree and her going her way. But I think it's a natural thing when kids are born because it goes from mom and dad as a partner to all the focus goes to the end game, which are children. And that happens for a sustained period of time. So you were 1 year old, you were 7, you were 14, you were 18, you were 20. That 20-year span, all the energy that we had towards each other kind of was redirected towards the kids. Well, and then all of a sudden you look up and it's a 20-year span, you kind of go, oh shit, what happened? Now you look and go, oh, well, the good news is I still love my partner. I still want to be with my partner, and it's been an interesting journey, but you have to recommit to what all that means, right? And so that was that was an interesting experience in that children do pull the partnership apart from a one-on-one, mom and dad, Lori and Darryl, to redirect energy towards the children. And then as you get to that point where all of a sudden later in life, you're starting to see the kids are now young adults and they're going to go in their direction, then you need to be careful and make sure that you are willing to accept you still love that person still loves you, and you're still prepared to give it all to that person because that journey has gone by and there may be some separation, but the next part of your life is going to be another rich journey.
Yeah. And were you able, when you were in it, now that you think about it as a young man, able to kind of future pace and see that future? Or was it, no, I didn't think so.
I don't care what anybody says. You can't, because when you're focused on something to be successful, your whole being is around that. If you really are going to be successful, you make that commitment in everything that you do. And sometimes that commitment is so powerful and so strong that you put your blinders on and that's all you do.
Yeah. You know, when you were talking there, I think one of the things that when I moved to Hawaii, right, and me and Malia were together for the first time living together, one of the biggest challenges that we had was her understanding of this is my mission, right? So she wasn't used to me being in the house, working every single day, being in the office, always having something else to do. It was a little bit of a different dynamic. And that communication aspect was something that we realized was very important. So we really, while we were in Hawaii, we used to laugh about this all the time, but we're like, we pride ourselves in having the tough conversations because it's much easier to talk about it and at least get it off your chest the first time because it's less scary coming back to it a second time.
Well, now,
you know what I mean?
Couple that with 2 babies running around.
I couldn't even imagine. I just mean, like, from a relationship perspective, the communication aspect, I just realized was so important.
That's why it's important that when you find that life partner, that you commit that that's going to be a life partner. Now, you're going to make some mistakes, and sometimes this road's not going to be smooth, and you're going to do some things that you're going to regret in a relationship. But at the end of the day, if you're fully committed to that person you love dearly, then it all comes back, and you can still love that person dearly. None of us are going to be perfect, but the journey is the journey. That's what you agreed to do when you find that life partner and you marry that person. You know that, guess what? Sometimes it's going to be messed up, and sometimes you're going to slam your hand in the door, and you're going to do some things that maybe you shouldn't have done, and sometimes you're going to put yourself in a vulnerable position. But at the end of the day, if it goes back to that, being that hunter or being that father, and you come from a good place, good things are going to happen. It's going to be a journey, and it's not always going to be fun. But when you look back and you ask yourself, could I have done better? And you know that you've given it all, given it your all. That's the rewarding part about being a good parent, is you've given it your all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you guys did an amazing job. Looking back, of course, hindsight is 20/20, but seeing some of the challenges that you guys went through were very interesting. Now that I'm older and have a better understanding of what life is actually like, right? Not just living in this bubble. My hat goes off.
Well,
to you guys,
don't forget, we did some things that were to some degree planned. Good example. We talk about when you were younger and we had no time to ourselves. We purposely moved.
Mm-hmm.
We purposely moved from the chaos around all of those busy things to be a family with our kids. We purposely.
Are we talking about the
move to Michigan? When we left the Seattle area, we had a couple business associates in Michigan. It's people that I knew. You guys knew no one.
Yeah, that was a big jump.
A huge jump.
Yeah, because it was like, we're moving to Michigan. It's 1997, and I had no idea what was out there. I literally just remember you guys packing up the house, me being on a skateboard, sliding around on my belly underneath the truck, and then everything happening so quickly. And the next thing you knew, we were on a plane and we were headed out.
And you were 7 years old. Mm-hmm. You were 7 years old when that happened. Think about that. 1997, you were 7 years old. Your sister was 4, just almost 4 years old, a little over 4 years old. We arrived there in September. We moved into our new house that we built in October of 1997. We made a conscious decision. From 1992 to 1997, we built a business. We made a conscious decision that, hey, because I was traveling a lot, and I said to your mom, hey, this is not good for us. We need to be together. And in order for us to be together, we need to move, and this is the reasons why. And if there's one regret of all of that, talk about hunting and being the leader and providing. In hindsight, one thing I should have done differently, and I still believe I should have, I shouldn't have said, this is what we're going to do and dictated that. I should have said, what do you think? Would you like to? And that's a different approach. But me being that hunter and just being out there and trying to drive all of this, it was a decision that was made. And because of her love for me and her love for our family, she said, okay, versus have a conversation. Let's talk about this. It was, we're going to sell the house. We're building another house and we're moving. Let's get ready. And boom, 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 it happened. Right? But that's learned experience, right? Yeah. But that was purposeful because what did that do for us as a family? We talk about being parents and so forth. It went back to where we started. It was back to the pod, right? It was back to Mom, Keenan, Alexa, and Darryl, and how we were going to build the rest of our lives together. And coincidentally, fast forward.
Yeah, I mean, it really created a sense of like independence. I don't know if it wasn't intentional. That's what it did though, because I remember being younger and being like, well, I mean, we guess, and I don't know if this was like a negative thought, but it was like, we really don't need anybody to be happy. Right. And so it's like, I always see people who like stay in the same communities and never leave the nucleus of the large family. And there's value to that. But also I think it's so limiting for some people because it's like, there's so much world out there, and it gave us different experiences. We got around different types of people. It also set up a framework for me. Like when I left for college, it was like, okay, well, we've done this before. This isn't as scary. And it's helped me kind of catapult around the world really since then.
What it does, Keenan, what it did for you, I think, and Alexa, it gave you an opportunity to grow. And it gave you an opportunity to grow. By giving you an opportunity to grow, you were prepared and not afraid to do something different. You were not afraid to step outside your boundaries and go somewhere else. As a matter of fact, that's your mom. That your mom was like, hey, you need to experience life. You need to move. You need to go and be around different people and learn new experiences and become more rounded as an individual, because you're better off by doing that versus staying in your little community. The kids that you played t-ball with when you were 6 years old are the same kids you're hanging around with today at 32 years old. And guess what? There's nothing more outside of that small ecosystem, and that's what you know, and that's what you do. And so when you go see the rest of the world, you're not prepared for that because you're at shock and awe, and you don't know how to communicate or assimilate to different cultures, societies, and people, because that's all you know is that neighborhood. Not in our world. We pushed you guys out there so you could become the people that you are and have a rich experience in life and what you've experienced.
I think that moving process in itself, like you said, gave us an opportunity to reform our family nucleus, which I thought was really important, but also created a lot of opportunities for us to kind of bond. Yes. So let's kind of take it down memory lane. Now that your son is 32 years old, your daughter's 29, she's about to be 30, she's engaged currently. When you look back at our childhood, what was one of your favorite bonding experiences? Was it a family trip? Was it going on sporting events? When you think about kind of the memories that you had when we were younger, what were some of those like? What was a favorite?
I think one thing that I look back, and it was this. When we had our young careers working for organizations, we were very limited in things that we could do. We were bound to the job. Because of some of the successes that we had as entrepreneurs and owning our businesses and doing the things that we were able to do, we could always be there with you, whatever you did. So Thursday afternoon, you got to leave and go to a baseball tournament. Guess what? We're there. We're going. Never was a choice, or never was a question. Are mom and dad going to be there, right? So my favorite moments, or what was rewarding for me as a father, was that we had the means and the ability to do whatever we wanted whenever we wanted. Right. So, for instance, we had an opportunity once. We jumped on a cruise ship. I looked on the web. We called it back then. I looked on the web and found an opportunity for a cruise that was leaving out of Boston. It was on Saturday. It was a last-minute deal. You guys didn't have school, so what did? We packed it up. We jumped into the Ford Expedition. We loaded up our stuff for the cruise. We drove across the 90 and over on the 80 and went into Boston. Went on a 7-day cruise to Bermuda, had a wonderful time together for the week, turned around and drove back home, and those are things you can never take back.
Yeah.
right? Because we had the flexibility, the wherewithal to do those things. Had I worked for another organization and been bound by a job, I doubt that we would have been able to make those decisions that way to do the things that we've done. Period. Other things. Being able to send the kids to school and watch you grow and know that when you left the house, you were okay. You were financially in a good position. You knew that you're going to go have a rich experience. You didn't have to worry about not being able to do what you wanted when you needed to do it. And the fact that Mom and I made those sacrifices and worked hard to provide that, that's also rich and rewarding for us.
Yeah. So what is a piece of advice to all the new fathers out there, right? Because today in society, we find that like the entrepreneurial lifestyle is so glamorized, right? But it's not as easy as everybody says it is. And I think a lot of people find themselves in positions today where they're unhappy with their job every single day. They realize that it's a little bit limiting. They want to take on the entrepreneurial lifestyle, but when they get into it, they're like, man, this is way harder than I thought. So what is your advice to the fathers who are just having children? How do they kind of balance that heart, right, and that hustle mentality with the new family? Would your advice be make sure that you're balancing those early days because they're never going to come back? Or
I think that, you know, when you're in your early profession, that you have got to have some foundational skills that prepare you to go out into the world. Whether it's learning how to communicate effectively in meetings, whether it's learning how to win people, whether it's learn based on your skill set and refine what those skills are before you can even step out into the world to go to try a business. And I've said this to you many times. It ain't easy what we do. As a matter of fact, it's kind of scary. A lot of folks don't have the courage or the confidence in themselves to expose themselves to the what if. They just don't. And so they want the false sense of security that by me having a job, working for a company, I'm going to be okay. That's all fine and all until you get north of 50 years old, and guess what? They stop valuing your skill sets. Next thing you know, they're downsizing, you're the first ones to go. And then you wonder, what did you do, right? Being an entrepreneur is not for everyone. It's the 80-20 rule. 20% will, 80% won't. I just happen to be on that 20% side of the equation, and that's all I've known, is how to survive, how to produce, how to make it happen. Not because I'm magical or not because my skills are better than anybody else's. It's just what I do. Not everybody can do what I do. Not everybody can do what you do. Not everybody can do what that person does who works for an organization. Find out what you do best. Find out where you're comfortable. Identify what your tolerance is for risk and reward. For me, my mentality has always been, to some degree, no biscuit, no risk it, no biscuit. So I'm not opposed to putting it out there. But then again, my skill sets and who I am and what I do mitigates the potential for loss. But I'm comfortable there. Not a lot of people do that. So as a young father, I would think you'd want to make sure that you understand that, make sure your foundation's ready, make sure your household is ready, and that you're in a position where you can win knowing that you've got the right support from your loved ones, your children, your wife, who's going to make all the difference in the world, or your partner who's going to make all your difference in the world, and then go do it and do it the best you can. And every day, burn that bridge behind you because you can't go back. You cannot go back.
I mean, a big thing that I think about is, when we kind of think about everything that we talked about today, communication becomes a huge component, especially when you're going to take on risk to provide for your family. It's not just communication about what the expectation is in the family household, but about the mentality that comes around with being an entrepreneur and being the hunter, like you've said many times. But more importantly, that tolerance of risk is something that I talked about with a previous guest on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. He's a part of a family business as well, and he talked about how, and I kind of leveraged it this way. I was like, do you think your life experience has made you more tolerant to risk? And he was like, yeah, now that I think about it, because it's been how it's been for my entire life, right? This is all I know. And so I've been through the ups and downs and the risky and the scary times, but that really does become a part of your family culture, you know, and those two things really can't be compartmentalized. So my advice to people who are starting families is recognize the risk that you're taking. And you cannot be half pregnant when it comes to really trying to accomplish this kind of stuff.
There's no such thing as being half pregnant. You're either in or you're out, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think for me, just Darryl Hart, me as an individual, I am who I am because of who your mom is.
Yeah.
Honestly, I am who I am because of who your mom is. Because your mom recognized who I could be before I recognized who I could be. And that's powerful. She believed in me before I believed in myself. And so I couldn't be here today if it wasn't for her commitment to me and to us as a family. There's no way.
Yeah.
I mean, there's absolutely no way. And I can't deny that. You know, so that whole parenting thing, yeah, it's one thing to say it's your dad, but guess what? It's your mom too.
Yeah. That's understandable.
Yeah.
Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on the pod today. And
Yeah,
just
it's
talking
good talk.
about kind of fatherhood in general, because I know a lot of
Yeah.
people out there, especially from like an entrepreneurial perspective, right? We're always trying to make the best of ourselves in this world.
Right.
And a huge part of that is also investing into a family nucleus because it balances us out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like my goal is to be successful, but I don't want to do it by myself the entire time, you know? And so realizing and learning from people's experiences and their insights like yours in raising a family is very valuable to me. Plus, I'm sure everybody else who's listening as well.
Keenan, if you do it by yourself and for yourself, you will limit what you can do for yourself and for others.
Yeah.
So that's a good way to look at it. Don't do it by yourself, and make sure that at some point you're doing it for others. And that's so rewarding.
Well, that's a great place for us to stop.
Yep.
Thanks, guys, for tuning in for the Heart and Hustle podcast. This was a Father's Day special with my father, the heart of my hustle and or the heart of your hustle. I just can't, thank you enough for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Love you, kid.
Yeah, I love you too.